Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Today I'm going to be introducing the topic of trigonometry. This is quite an abstract topic. This is sort of not very intuitive, okay? So I'm going to try to do my best to explain what it is, how to use it. It would have been a lot better if I could do it in person and we had a bit more time, but situation is what it is. So, trigonometry is about angles in triangles. Tri means three in Greek, gonos means angles, metros, measuring. So measuring angles in triangles. That's what trigonometry is about. Now, the very first thing that you have to bear in mind is that trigonometry, or basic trigonometry, only works in right angle triangles, okay? That's just it. Later on next year you will see more advanced trigonometry. For now, right angle triangles. The next thing you have to be really careful about with trigonometry is labeling the sides, so naming the sides. Now, if I got a right angle triangle, by now we'll know that the side opposite the right angle is always going to be the hypotenuse, and that's always going to be the longest side in the triangle. Then the other two sides, and we're going to label them. The name of the other two sides depends on which angle you're looking at them from. So, if I'm looking from angle X, the side opposite the angle is called the opposite side. And the side that is next to the angle is called the adjacent. Adjacent means next to. There we are. However, and like I said, you have to be careful with this. If I had the same angle, this would be the hypotenuse. But if now I'm looking from here, and I call this angle, let's call it Y. If I'm looking at things from the perspective of angle Y, the opposite side is now this one down here, because it's opposite the angle. And this side here is going to be the adjacent, which is the side next to it. So always be careful. You always have to label the sides first. Start with the hypotenuse. Think about which angle they have given you, and then the side opposite the angle is going to be the opposite side, and the side next to it is always going to be the adjacent. Okay. Once you've identified the adjacent, the opposite, and the hypotenuse, we can start calculating something that is called something called the trigonometric ratios. Right. So here I've got my right angle triangle. I am looking at it from angle X. I need to label the sides. Hypotenuse, opposite, adjacent. Okay, so the three trigonometric ratios are called the sine, the cosine, and the tangent. Like the tangent to a circle, it's the same thing, the tangent. Now, the sine of X is defined as the opposite divided by the hypotenuse. So, for an angle, let's call it X, the sine of the angle is the proportion of the opposite to the hypotenuse. If I divide one by the other, that's going to give me the sine of the angle. It's like a property. Every angle has got three properties. The cosine of X is the adjacent divided by the hypotenuse. And you need to learn this. These are not given to you in the exam. And the tangent of X is the opposite divided by the adjacent. Okay, these three ratios you need to learn. Sometimes, a lot of the time, people use the word SOHCAHTOA to remember this thing. So SOHCAHTOA, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, tangent is opposite over adjacent. So that's a good way to remember these things. And basically, once you've got these, you can use it to find missing angles in right angle triangles if you know some of the sides. So let's look at an example. Okay, and I'm actually going to do 2 examples and see how it goes. Right, here I've got angle A, and I've got this right angle triangle, and they've given me those 2 sides, and they want me to find angle A. The first thing I'm going to do is label the sides. This is the opposite, this is the adjacent, and that's the hypotenuse. So how am I going to find angle A? Well, which 2 sides do I know? The opposite and the hypotenuse. So if I remember from my SOHCAHTOA, if I know the opposite and the hypotenuse, I can find the sine of the angle, because remember, the sine of A is opposite divided by hypotenuse. I cannot find the cosine, because in order to find the cosine, I will need to know the adjacent, which I don't, and I cannot find the tangent either, because again I will need to know the adjacent, which I do not. So the only ratio I can find is the sine. So I will write in my exam that sine A is 5 over 10. So the sine of A is 0.5. But that's not the angle, that's the sine of the angle. So once I've got this, how do I find the angle? Well, for that, you need a proper scientific calculator like this, okay? And once you do 5 divided by 10, and you've got 0.5 on your screen, you need to find the following buttons. In the top left corner, you have something called second function, or sometimes, instead of second function, the button is the shift button. So with the 0.5 number on the screen, I will do second function, or shift, then I will press the sine button because I found the sin. So you can see at the top, it says sin cos tan. That's sin cos tan that we've talked about. So I will do second function, sine, and then press the equals button. And therefore I can write that A is 30 degrees. You should get 30 degrees on your screen. If you do second function sin 0.5 and you don't get 30 degrees, your calculator is in the wrong setting, and you need to figure out how to put it in degrees, because you're probably in radians, because you've been touching and playing with your calculator when you shouldn't have. If you've got any issues, ask for help. And that's it. Here, I'm going to do this other example here. Again, first thing I need to do, I want to find angle Y, label the sides. That's the hypotenuse, because it is always the opposite, the right angle. 3 is the opposite, and 7 is the adjacent. So, if I know the opposite and I know the adjacent, which trig ratio can I find? Well, it's the tangent, isn't it? If I know these 2 sides, the only ratio I can find is the tangent. So I'm going to write that tan y equals opposite divided by adjacent. So I get my calculator, and I do 3 divided by 7, which is 0.4 blah blah blah, something or other. Then, I don't have to show this in the exam, but I need to do, again, shift, tan, and then equals. Tan, because I've calculated the tan. So with the answer from the division on the screen, without touching anything, I do second function, or shift, tan, and then equals. And it says 23.2 rounded to 1 decimal place. So angle Y is 23.2 degrees. And that is how you use trigonometry to find missing angles in rectangle triangles. So thank you very much. Sophia's just arrived and spoiled the video, so I'll see you later. Bye.